will explain about the other part of the definition after once you are done copying this particular definition. I'm sorry. So copy the definition here. So I will explain about the other remaining part of the definition once you are done copying this text here. Done, everybody? Okay. So I hope everybody have understood the main objective of machine is to convert any form of energy to mechanical work. Okay. So any form of energy you should be converting into mechanical work. That's the objective here basically. Understand? Now how it is done? If you see this particular animation, okay, that is basically a slider crank mechanism. Understand? So this is basically a slider crank mechanism. You can see here. So crank is rotating and making the cylinder to reciprocate. So what you are doing is basically you are converting reciprocatory motion to rotatory motion, or rotatory motion can be converted to reciprocatory motion here. So reciprocatory motion is converted to rotatory motion, or rotatory motion is converted to reciprocatory motion here. Understand? So this actually should be called as a mechanism. So you can take it as machine also. So basically what happening is, if you are going from left to right, okay, so reciprocatory motion is being converted to rotatory motion, means basically here, so we are using it as a pump. Sorry. Reciprocatory motion is converted to rotatory motion, means we are using it an engine, IC engine basically. So if you would like to use as an IC engine, so it will be converted reciprocatory motion of the cylinder into rotatory motion here. So if you are using rotatory motion and creating reciprocatory motion, that means we will be using it for a pump. So we will be studying about reciprocatory pumps in thermodynamics if it is there in syllabus there. So we will be using the same mechanism, but the way we are using is different. So for IC engine, this is input, this is output. For pumps, this is input and this is output here. Okay, so how it is achieved here? You can see here that there are many resisting bodies. There are many bodies which are not undergoing any deformation, or whatever deformation that is occurring, that is negligible. You can see here, crank is a resisting body. Connecting rod is a resisting body. Okay, so cylinder is a resisting body. The frame is a resisting body. So these resisting bodies are joined in a particular fashion so that one form of energy is converted to another form of energy here. One form of energy is being converted to other form. So machine is produced by using these resisting bodies. Okay, so which are joined in a particular fashion so that one form of energy is converted to other form. Okay, so if you are using it as an IC engine, then reciprocatory motion is converted to rotatory motion here. Understand? If you are using it as a pump, so there rotatory motion is being converted to reciprocatory motion here. Understood? And corresponding energies basically. Clear? So once you are doing the conversion of motion, automatically energy will also be converted. So we see only the motion when we are using it as a mechanism here. So as far as I'm calling it as slider crank mechanism, I can say that reciprocatory motion is being converted to rotatory motion, or rotatory motion is being converted to reciprocatory motion. Understand? When I'm using it as an engine, okay, when I'm using it as an IC engine, then I should be saying that the chemical energy of the fuel is causing reciprocatory motion, and that is giving rise to rotatory motion, and giving rise to this rotatory motion is giving rise to rotatory kinetic energy. When I'm using it as a pump, okay, so maybe the electricity, whatever it is, the input energy for this particular pump is causing rotatory motion, because electrical motor will convert electrical energy to rotatory kinetic energy here. So the rotatory kinetic energy is causing this particular rotatory motion, and this motion is being used to produce this reciprocatory motion for the cylinder, and this reciprocatory motion of the cylinder will cause the pressure of the liquid in the pump to go to higher value, and that is what done by a pump here. So this is how all these things are connected. Understand, everybody? Clear? So machine means basically, you can understand from here, the combination of resisting bodies which are constrained or joined in a particular fashion in such a way that one form of energy is converted to mechanical energy. So a machine always expects you to convert any form, internal energy of a steam, chemical energy of a fuel, potential energy of a thing that is falling, whatever may be the type of energy here, you will be using it to produce mechanical energy. So mechanical energy means mostly rotatory kinetic energy. You take turbine, output of turbine is rotatory kinetic energy, which you use it to run generator. Understand? So like that you take anything, even you take IC engine. So the crankshaft will be rotating at the end. So whatever chemical energy of fuel is there will be coming out of rotatory kinetic energy as the crankshaft. So the crankshaft is connected with the gearbox, clutches, all these things and all, and it is connected at the wheel. So wheel will be rotating with required amount of speed and torque. Understood everybody? What is the definition of a machine? Clear everyone? Okay. So let's go ahead. So machine design basically, so you should be knowing the definition of machine design before starting our subject, because machine design field, if you take, it's a very vast field. Okay, and we are not going to study about the whole field, or at least the basic idea about the whole field in this particular lecture. Okay, not even in your master degree program also. So basically at this level, what you are going to do is, we are going to study about all the basic elements which are used to produce or which are used in making a machine. So basic elements means building blocks of a machine. So whatever machine you see, the machine may be a steam turbine, the machine may be a gas turbine, the machine may be a reciprocatory pump, the machine may be an IC engine, whatever may be a machine, mostly you will see few common elements or few common parts. Example, bearings, clutches, brakes, springs, okay, joints, many things like this. Understand? So at this level, what we are going to do is basically, we are going to study about this particular designing of these machine elements. So I was actually showing you, I was about to show you this particular car and centralized machine. Two are completely different machines. But if you take basic elements, they are common. They are having gears, they are having bearings, they are having, they'll be having brakes. Okay, so they'll be having wheels, they'll be having some rotatory components, they'll be having joints. Many things will be there. Understand? Clear? So whatever will be the machine, few elements will be common. So at this basic level of machine design, we are going to study about design of these machine elements. This definition will no longer be valid if you are going to PhD level, or if you are going for postdoc level, or if you are even going for master degree level in some cases. Understand? So this is at this particular level here. So that's the reason why if you see some machine design textbooks, they are given with the name of design of machine elements. The machine design textbooks which we use, which we level undergraduate students and students who are preparing for GATE use, those books are having title as design of machine elements, because they're not going to teach about whole machine design, whole field of machine design. They're going to explain you about designing of basic machine elements only. The basic elements are joints, bearings, clutches, brakes, gears, springs, etc. So in our syllabus we have these six elements here, and before studying about all these 5 elements, first all these 6 elements, first of all we are going to study about static loads and dynamic loads, because how the loads are acting on these components, how they are affecting these elements, how they are damaging these elements, everything is going to be very, very important. So first of all, we are going to study about these loads in the first chapter. Mostly will be completing this chapter by today, and then we'll go one by one. So then we'll see in the next class designing of joint. So first of all, our machine element is joint. Then we're going to study about bearings. Then we're going to study about clutches. Then about brakes. Then gears. Then springs. Only these elements are there in our syllabus. So nothing beyond this is there in our syllabus. Understand? So if you go through previous IES papers or IES exam syllabus, you might be having key joints also in syllabus. Understand? So because but that is not there in our GATE syllabus here. Understand? Splines might be there in our syllabus. Understand? So designing of splines may be in the syllabus, but that is not there in our syllabus of GATE examination. Understand? Okay, everybody. So first of all, kindly copy this whole syllabus here. So we'll go ahead with the first chapter after this one. Okay. So everybody listen carefully here. So I have shown you the syllabus here. If you compare this particular syllabus with the syllabus in your particular GATE notification, taking screenshots is only an option. Okay, I'm not strictly imposing on everybody here, because few people will be comfortable in copying and having everything in their notes. So only thing I would like to convey is whatever the method you use, try to take optimum time. Don't take much time which is not more than required. That's what only my concern here. Okay, fine, let's go ahead. So if you do the comparison of the syllabus which is shown on this particular table along with the syllabus which is there, which going to be there in your gate notification, you're going to see two things extra in the part. So first one is theories of failure, second one will be designing of shafts. So I'm writing down here. So theories of failure and design of shafts. Okay, look here. So these two things are already covered in SOM subject. Okay, so theories of failure is already covered in SOM subject. In fact, this is the concept which should be taught in SOM only. Understand? And design of shafts is also taught in SOM with the name torsion or torsion of shafts. So if you go through the SOM lecture, you can easily find out. Understand? So there, in a very detailed way, these two things are explained. Because this theories of failure, to understand this theories of failure, you have to start from the definition of stress. Earlier I used to take from there definition of stress, definition of strain, all these things, conventional stress, conventional strain, principal stresses, how they're going to come, what is the formula in 2D state of stress, what is the formula in 3D state of stress, all these things. So I used to take some at least 4 hours to complete only this particular part here, theories of failure itself. So unnecessarily, like I was teaching many number of times. So I was teaching for SOM lecture, I was teaching for machine design lecture, again I was teaching in the repetitive second time when SOM is going to happen. So unnecessarily, like the subject, the topic is being taught more number of times, though it is same, and time is being wasted. So that's why this time I'm not going with this explanation here. So I advise you people to go through the lecture of SOM. Second chapter we'll be having it, so we'll be having this particular concepts there, understand? And this thing is a 4th chapter, or the topic or the chapter will be having the name as torsion. So if you go through them, you'll have the complete idea about that. Okay, so apart from these two, you have everything here. So you'll be having the remaining whole part in the syllabus itself. This is completely keeping in mind regarding the preparation time for the student. I don't want a student to waste unnecessarily some 3 + 3 6 hours of time extra in machine design here. Okay, if you have listened, ideally speaking, everybody should be gone through SOM subject here. So if you have gone through these concepts in SOM, then it's a double time here. Okay, so those people who have joined after summer, if you haven't listened the SOM lecture which was happened before summer, anyways you're going to have it afterwards. So you are going to listen these two concepts live at least once. That's going to happen without any fail. Understand? So it will be wrong if you're not given chance to listen live lectures of these two concepts at least once. Okay, so anyways they are going to happen. That's the reason why I'm not going to cover in this particular subject. I'm letting you people know now itself. Okay, everybody. So earlier I used to teach design for static loading separately, design for dynamic loading separately, but from now I'll be teaching both of them as a single chapter itself. Okay, so this actually comes in design for static loading only, and the highest important topic in the particular machine design subject is this one. Please write down the first page of your notes. Every year, one question is compulsory from this particular topic. You will not see mechanical engineering gate paper, all the sets, without having a single theories of failure question. It was the pattern we were observing from past 6 to 7 years. From 2013 we are observing here. Not even from 2013. We are observing from 2012. So 2012, 13. So just remove 20 from 11. This 9 years we are observing this thing. 9 years. From past 9 years we are observing this pattern. So every year one question from theories of failure is compulsory. Understand? Clear? So please write down. So if you have leftover, I'm telling about the worst case scenario here. If you are missing out to study or do the revision of machine design, that's okay, not a problem. But make sure to do the revision of theories of failure, because you are going to get that 1 mark or 2 marks 100% after going through my lecture. I have taught in particular fashion in such a way that every theory of failure will be having 2 equations and a diagram, and using them you can solve any question at least in the gate level. Okay, you can try to solve questions of IES level also, but at least in GATE you can clear any question. So that will not create any confusion at all. So you are not going to miss this 1 mark or 2 marks here. So you should not be missing that thing, because you know that it is going to come for sure in GATE 2020 examination, GATE 2021 examination as well. So please take care regarding that one. Okay, everybody, shall we go ahead? So meanwhile, you guys can do parallelly the lectures of SOM. Those people who have joined after summer. So anyways, we have a good amount of time. So every day, if you are listening 1-2 hours of machine design, SOM lectures, so you'll be completing these 2 topics within 1 week itself. So whatever doubts you have, you can ask me in the classroom also. I'll explain it very clearly. Okay. So let's go ahead. So first one here, design for static and dynamic loading. So like I said, so from this particular first chapter, that means first part of the chapter, that is design for static loading, theories of failure is very important. One question going to be compulsory for sure in GATE 2020 examination, 21 examination. Okay. And the second part of the chapter, that is design for dynamic loading, that is also important. I'm going to show you and make you solve the questions at the end of the lecture here. So most of the questions are from the last part of the chapter. So, but a few questions are from initial part also, where basics are covered. So we'll cover concept by concept, step by step, and complete the syllabus. And in between also we'll be seeing few number of questions, and tougher questions and all we'll be seeing at the end. So based upon that, you'll understand how important all these concepts here. Okay, everybody, kindly put this title. So we'll start with this particular first chapter, design for static and dynamic loading. Done, everybody? Okay, so let's go ahead. So in this one, we have 2 sections to be covered, or 2 parts to be covered. So first one is designing for the static loading, and second one is designing for the dynamic loading. Designing for static loading, there is nothing here, because whatever you did in SOM, whatever you did in engineering mechanics, completely it is designing for static loading itself. We already dealt with designing for static loading in those 2 subjects here. So we'll see the basics which are required to understand about designing for dynamic loading, and then we'll complete the chapter here. So first of all, let's understand the definition. What exactly is a static load? So from now, I want people to give me answers. Okay, so the introduction and everything, I have given answers directly without asking any questions here. So from now, I want you people to think and give me the answers. So for those people who are listening machine design lecture for the second time, so I advise you people to not to give the answers. Let other people who are listening for the first time think. Let them think. Otherwise, if they're not thinking, everything will become in such a way that they have to mug up. Simply. Okay. So let them think. So based upon static load term, what do you understand from this one? So please let me know the definition here. It is not about the body here. It is about the load we are talking about. Understand? If I ask you a static body, so you can say the body is at rest. Okay. Understand? If I say equilibrium body, we can say that body is at equilibrium. We are not concerned about the body now. We are concerned about the load here. Static load means basically, so static means something should be constant with respect to time, or something should be constant. So here load should be constant here. So how load can be constant? Load is a vector quantity, or force is a vector quantity. Load can change its magnitude, load can change its direction. So you can say a load to be a static load only when both these 2 things are common, both these 2 things are constant with respect to time. If you keep load magnitude should be if you keep load magnitude to be constant, if you keep this load magnitude to be constant, and also this particular direction to be constant, then we say this particular load to be static load here. For example, you take the weight of the plank on the 4 legs of the table. You take the plank weight itself. So this plank weight is always from the starting of usage of the table to the day you're going to throw it or sell it on OLX or some other second-hand app there. So till then, this particular 4 legs are going to experience same magnitude of load and in the same direction. So the whole weight of the plank, will be of same value. It's not going to change with respect to time. And also the direction of load going to be constant with respect to time. So we can call the thing as a static load. Now you take your weight, you're sitting on a bench. So you will be sitting on the bench, that means your weight on the bench will be there till you are sitting on the bench there, or till the lecture is not over. Once the lecture gets complete, you will be leaving from there. So for some time load is constant, after some time load is disappearing, and after some time again, after next day, tomorrow, whenever you have class, immediately you will be coming and sitting on the bench there, right? So the load is going on changing with respect to time. The load is going on changing with respect to time here, understand? So that is called as a dynamic load. So your weight on a bench is basically a dynamic load, but the weight of the plank on the legs of the table are actually a static load here. So that is how a static load and dynamic load are differentiated. Understand? So we'll talk about dynamic load in a more detailed way in the coming slides. So first of all, write down the definition of a static load here. Load which is applied to a machine element and which does not change in magnitude and direction with respect to time. Kindly copy this, everybody. Okay, done, everybody? Okay. So whatever the loads you have studied or you have taken in any loading condition in the subject of engineering mechanics, in the subject of machine, in the subject of strength of materials, all the loads were of static type only. Understand? So all the loads you have dealt with them were not changing with respect to time for regarding magnitude and also direction. So all were static loads itself. So designing for static loading you have already studied. Whatever you did in SOM and engineering mechanics, it is completely designing for static loading itself. Understand? So you should go with few concepts from SOM, otherwise we can't understand the coming concepts here. So if you take failure definition, basically, so failure means basically, may I know the definition of failure we had discussed in SOM subject? Those people who have attended my SOM lecture, can I have the answer? What is the definition of failure? If whatever the component is there, whatever the objective it has to satisfy, if it is not getting satisfied, we say that got failed. For example, you have fan in your room. The fan is supposed to rotate and make you or circulate the air in the room. Okay, circulate the air in the room here. So let's assume that its bearing got faulty. Okay, and due to the friction in the bearing or failure of the bearing, what happened is it is unable to rotate easily and do the required job. So we say fan got failed. Whatever may be the reason, if it is not doing the required job or if it is not satisfying the required desired things, then we say the material or the component got failed. For example, you take gears. So gears are required to do the power transmission. So from input gear, power should go on to the output gear. Let's assume the gear tooth got broken and there is no smooth power transmission. Then we say gear got failed. Understand? Clear? Okay, everybody. So in this way, failure means if the component is unable to satisfy the required need or do the required need or do the required desired thing, then we say the component got failed. Understood? I'm writing down here. So failure means if the machine element. So here we are concerned about machine elements only, not in a general sense because it's for machine design. So if the machine element is unable to satisfy its objective, satisfy or do the objective. So we say then we say the machine element got failed. Understand? So it's a very, very important thing. So when you're studying subjects like SOM and machine design, you should be knowing the definition of failure. Otherwise, it's going to be. I'm just taking care of people who haven't gone through the definition of SOM. Sorry, who haven't gone through the lectures of SOM. Okay, so I'm just going with those basics here. Once you're done copying, please let me know. Okay. Now, if you take the materials we have on Earth, maybe directly available materials like aluminium, okay, few invented materials like alloys, etc., carbon fiber, etc., composite materials. So whatever the type of material you take, solid material you take, which was present on Earth now, that will be either ductile brittle. That will be either ductile or brittle. Understand? So you take, how to differentiate ductile and brittle is, if it is a ductile material, it will show plastic deformation, and if it is a brittle material, it will not show any plastic deformation. Let me show you how. If you do tensile testing and draw simple stress strain curve for a ductile material, example of ductile material is like aluminium, mild steel, etc. You do the tensile testing, you're going to see that it will show some elastic behavior, and stress will be proportional to strain in that particular region, and afterwards it will show some plastic region here. So first of all, you'll be having elastic region, then we'll be having plastic region. So elastic, plastic, I hope everybody know. Elastic means ability to regain its original shape and dimensions once the load is removed. Plastic region means unable to regain its original shape and dimensions when load is removed. Okay, so permanent deformation will happen in plastic region, and no permanent deformation will occur in the elastic region here. So if you do the same loading for a brittle material, what happens is there will be no plastic region. So simply, if you see, the curve will be like this. So simple stress strain elastic region will be coming up here. So stress will be proportional to strain, and immediately fracture will happen. So here at the end of elastic region, fracture will happen. There will be no plastic region at all. So this is how we differentiate a ductile material and a brittle material. Many people confuse that ductile material should be elastic, brittle material should not be elastic. Please remove this definition from your mind. I'm repeating once again. Many people have the misconception that ductile material should be elastic in nature and brittle material should not be elastic in nature. Please remove this misconception thing from your mind, because any material will show elastic behavior. Only the level of elasticity will be different. Understand? So how it is behaving after elastic region going to differentiate or going to make it as ductile metal or brittle material. Understand? So if it is showing any plastic deformation before the fracture, it is called as a ductile material. If it is not showing any plastic deformation before the fracture, immediately after the elastic deformation, if it is undergoing fracture, we say it is a brittle material. That is how we differentiate between a ductile metal and a brittle material here. Understood? So whatever metal you take, either it will be falling into the category of ductile material or into a brittle material here. Understand? Now, if you take this particular ductile material, there will be a point, we call it as yield point. We denote it by S suffix yt. We denote it by S suffix yt, yield point. So that is a point from where this particular plastic region starts. Understand? So that particular plastic region starts. Okay. So if you take a brittle material, so this is the point where fracture happens. Okay. So this point will give the name as ultimate stress. So UT. So yield stress in tension. Ultimate stress in tension. In fact, if you take different types of ductile materials, so few ductile materials will have a peak here and it will be having a ultimate point also. So ultimate stress or ultimate point means highest value of stress a metal can take. Okay, so these ductile materials can have a stress strain curve like this. I'm showing it here. So I hope many people are familiar with these things here. So if we take mild steel, it will be having a stress strain curve like this. So this will also be having SUT. Okay, it's not that only brittle metals will be having SUT, ultimate tensile stress value. So every metal will have some highest value of stress. We call it as ultimate stress. Okay, but in brittle metals, what happens is at the ultimate stress value, only fracture will happen. Understand? So this is the point where fracture is happening, and in ductile metals, we are not concerned about the fracture point. We are concerned about the point where elastic region is getting disappeared and plastic region is being started. That point we call it as yield point. So in ductile metals we have yield point, and in brittle metals we have ultimate point. Clear, everybody? Understood? And these two we call them as stresses at failure. These 2 points we call them as stresses at failure. I mean, we consider the metal got failed once stress reaches this point in ductile metal and brittle metal respectively. Are you able to understand here, everybody? Understand? So this particular stresses are taken as stresses at failure. Okay, and the point for stress at failure is yield point in ductile materials and ultimate stress in brittle materials here. Understood? So these 2 points are very, very important for ductile metal and brittle metal respectively. Okay, everybody. So kindly copy them first of all, everybody, and remember these particular suffixes SYT, SUT here. Brittle metal will also be having SUT, but we'll be going with SYT itself. Kindly copy this. I'll tell you why we are going with these yield point and ultimate stress points as failure stresses for ductile and brittle metal respectively. So I'll tell you what's the reason behind that, then we'll go ahead. Kindly copy this, everyone. Okay, look here. So very simple understanding why we are going with yield points and a fracture point in ductile and brittle metals respectively. So, and why we are not going with fracture point only in both the cases. That's what we are going to study here. Okay, so this thing is very clear because once a metal breaks, we can't use it. Clear? That's the reason why we are going with the stress value at the fracture point only as the failure stress, which is nothing but the ultimate stress itself. Now coming to this one here. Imagine you have a bolt. I hope everybody know what is a bolt. So we'll be using it to tighten or to join 2 plates. Imagine that the bolt got plastically deformed. Okay, so we will not be using the particular bolt which once got plastically deformed. In real life scenario, wherever you see any component, once it experiences any sort of plastic deformation, we will not be using it. For example, imagine you're having a table. So table is having 4 legs. So 4 legs are made up of metal only, and due to some reason one of the leg got bent plastically. Understand? So imagine you're having a table and 4 legs are there. So due to some reason one of the leg got deformed plastically. So I'm talking about the plastic deformation here. So complete deformation. So let's assume that this got bent like this due to something. You kicked it, or you taken some another big strong strong bat or something and hit on that one. It's a very thin rod, so it got bent here. In very, very rare case, okay, so it's in a very, very rare case, you will be again bending it to the straight position and you'll be using it. Okay, so just to save money, you'll be doing it, but mechanically, or if you apply the mechanics concepts there, the ideal person will never be asking you to do that one. Or basically, you take a technician, will not be expecting you to do that thing there. I will put another example here. Listen properly here. One day, my friend met with an accident. He met with a minor accident. Okay, so he got very small minor injuries. But what happened is, he was on a bike while driving while he was driving, and he was on a bike, and he hit some other person, and the handle got tilted. So you know that like the handle of a bike will be having 2 rods which are mounted on the wheel. So if you rotate the handle, wheel will get rotated. So what happened is, due to the impact, the 2 rods got plastically deformed. They got bent. The handle from this normal position, it permanently got bent like this through some angle. So it got bent like this one means the 2 rods which were straight initially, they got some twisting effects. So we took the bike to the service center and we asked him, we met with an accident, so make this rod straight and we'll go away. We'll pay the bill and we'll go. So just all you have to do is just bend the rods to the straight thing here. The immediate technician said, sir, that is not correct way of doing it. Your metal is gone. You have to replace those 2 rods. Understand? That's the thing which was said by the technician in the Hero service center there. So we had to remove the 2 rods and we had to get the new rods for that one. So what you should be understanding from this thing is, in real life scenario, we will not be using any component once it undergoes plastic deformation. Whatever product you have, once it undergoes plastic deformation, you will not be using it. Clear? So kindly keep this thing in mind here. So we say failure got happened as soon as the stress reaches the yield point. So I am not sure whether the examples are completely understandable or not. But I hope, but it is convincing for you people to keep in mind that we take yield point in ductile materials as failure stress. Okay, and in brittle materials we will be taking as this ultimate stress only because fracture is happening there. So in ductile materials, keep in mind that we will be going with yield point only. We don't need to wait till the fracture to happen. Clear, everybody? Understood? Just keep this thing in mind. So this is the failure stress. Okay, everybody, other people, is it clear or not? So maybe in future, based upon your experience, you'll understand that why we don't use ductile materials. Okay, so the thing itself is, you just have to keep in mind that ductile materials are not used once they undergo plastic deformation. So we will be using them till they undergo some elastic deformation only. Clear? And brittle materials anyways, once they undergo fracture, we will not be using them. So next thing we should be understanding is strength of a material. Strength of a material means this failure stress. So stress at failure, we call it as strength of a material. So failure means yielding in ductile materials and fracture in brittle materials. So yield point is the strength of the material for a ductile material, and ultimate stress is the strength of the material for a brittle material. Understood? So write down just the definition there. Strength of material means failure stress of the material. Failure stress of the material is called as, I am writing down here. Look here, everyone. So we should understand about the next term that's called as factor of safety. Many people might be already familiar with this particular term. So, but let's understand in a more detailed way now. Let's imagine you are using an elevator. You would like to go to the 10th floor of a building, so you're using an elevator. So there will be some maximum capacity for a number of people. So might be like 10 people at maximum, 680 kilo, something like that they will write down. Have you ever thought what would happen if we are crossing out the particular limits? Have you ever thought? Mostly you might have experienced that alarm went on and alarm is or warning is saying that someone has to get down. Clear? Okay, so one day like it happened with me as well. So I was in Central Mall and so many people were inside the elevator. Okay, so people were packed and the elevator was completely filled and so the alarm went on, or this particular warning voice came up, and warning voice says that like maximum weight crossed. So all were looking into the person who was fat, okay, who was the most fatter person in the particular crowd there. So that guy took it in a funny way and he said that okay, I understood that I have to get down, so I'm getting down. So like that he did. So anyways, so what I would like to convey here is, though they have kept that particular signboard for 10 people, still alarm went on or the warning sign came up, but the rope didn't got broken. So what you should be understanding here is, what are the signboard they are actually keeping, it is not with respect to the breaking load of the rope. We are not going to keep it like this. Let's assume that the rope is a ductile material, so yielding will happen at, let's assume that 100 megapascal, let's take it. Okay, let's assume that 100 megapascal corresponds to 10 people. So they know that yielding will start, failure will happen. Okay, so failure will happen at 100 megapascal, it will start yielding at 100 megapascal. But what they do is, they will keep some very less value as a limit and do the designing or keep it for the signboard and all. They will not use this value, failure value or strength of the material. They know failure will happen here, but they keep limit as not this one. Instead, they will keep some other value here. Instead of keeping this thing as a limit, they will be keeping this particular value here. Why? The reason is, many reasons are there. One of the very important reason, if you take for that elevator example itself, is that You can't every time expect that average weight of all the people to be is equal to 68 only. If the weight they're expecting it to be 680, so 10 people into 68 means like it should be 680 kilo. Okay, either everyone should be having 68 kilo or average weight should come out to be 68 kilo there. Okay, or all the total weight should come out to be 680 kilo there. It should happen like that. Understand? But not every time it's going to be possible. Clear? So if they keep with respect, if you do the designing with respect to 100 megapascal here, the moment that change happens or the moment it crosses the 100 megapascal, immediately the rope will break and immediately people will fall. So anyways, really it's not going to happen, but that is the basic way in which we can understand that thing. So instead of designing with respect to the strength of the material or failure stress, what generally in most of the cases the designers will be doing is they'll be designing with respect to a lower value with respect to the failure stress, far lower value there. So this value is anyways equal to failure stress, and this value which we are taking or deciding, we call them as allowable stress. So due to many reasons, instead of designing with respect to failure stress, we will be actually designing with respect to allowable stress. Instead of keeping this as a limit and making sure that stresses are not going beyond this particular limit, instead we will be taking this point as a limit and we'll make sure stresses are not going beyond this particular limit here. So this is called as allowable stress. It is completely decided by you. This value is completely decided by you, and always keep in mind these particular failure stresses are always experimental. You cannot be calculating using some equations. You will be doing testing, universal testing machine. You might be using that machine to find out tensile strength, compressive strength, etc. Okay, and using them you are going to evaluate these values. Understood? So failure stress value is always experimental, and this value, allowable stress value, is always like you gotta decide. Okay, so decided value. So based upon your way of designing, you decide that value there. That's it's your choice. Okay, it's your choice. Nobody is going to restrict you. Okay, so if you want to design with respect to 99 megapascal, still you can do it. It's completely your choice there. If you're designing with 50 megapascal, you can design there. If you think if you'd like to, if you're designing with 99 megapascal, you can save the cost of the components. Okay, so you are a little bit, let's assume that like you are a little bit unethical. Okay, you're not concerned about safety of the people, but you're concerned about the profits immediately. So you might be doing with respect to that value there. Okay, I'm just joking there. So if you're very much concerned about the safety of the people, and also you're concerned that if people are safe, if nothing is happening, no failure is happening to elevators, in future more customers will come. So if you're planning your business in a long way, in a long run, you can definitely think about going this value here. So it's completely decided by you. Okay, so how your design going to be, so how you're expecting your design going to be decided by this value here. So you can expect, you can put any value as of your particular choice here. Understood? So what is this factor of safety? So factor of safety is equal to given by ratio of these two values. So failure stress by allowable stress. And always keep in mind, this factor of safety should always be greater than 1. This factor of safety should always be greater than 1. And kindly keep this thing in mind here. So factor of safety is equal to failure stress by allowable stress, and it should be always greater than 1. Why? I already told this allowable stress will be lesser than failure stress. So this fraction should be always greater than 1. If you are getting a situation, okay, where factor of safety is less than 1, that will happen when you take allowable stress value which is beyond the strength of the material. You know the metal will fail by 100 megapascal, but you are taking allowable stress as 200 megapascal. It's a very ridiculous thing. You know it's going to fail 100 megapascal and you're taking it as 200 megapascal. It's completely wrong way of designing. A ridiculous way of designing. Understand? So getting factor of safety less than 1 is a complete wrong thing. You should have factor of safety always greater than 1. That will happen when you are deciding allowable stress value far lesser than failure stress value there. It should not be equal to that also. If it is equal, you will get answer as 1 itself. Understood? So this is the definition of factor of safety. So after this, we'll start the dynamic load concept here. So how are we going to use factor of safety in designing of a chair? So listen here. Let's understand how to apply or how we are using factor of safety in designing of a chair. So you have designed a chair. It's having some dimensions. Okay. it's having some dimensions. So this whole it is made up of some materials and all these things are there. Okay. You know that if a person of 100 kilo sit on the chair, any of the leg will break or the whole chair will get dismantled. You know that like this whole assembly of these materials can take a maximum weight of 100 kg. Understand? So in designing of a chairs, what can you do? In elevators, we can put the warning sign, okay, and elevator will not move, people will come down, all these things are there, okay. So but here chair, in the chair case, what can you do? What can you do is you take size of the chair in such a way. Okay, so generally based upon the area of the chair, people will be sitting. For example, you are having a 3 plus 2 plus 1 sofa, 3 plus 2 plus 1. So you have sofa where 3 people can sit. You have another sofa where 2 people can sit. We have another chair where one person can sit. Understand? So based upon the space available, people will be sitting, right? Understand? So you know that if single person of 100 kilo is sitting on this chair, definitely like it will break. So 100 kilo person will be having area also. Will be covering more amount of space. So what you do is, while designing itself, you make the chair's area to be lesser. You take everything same but keep the area to be lesser. So just by looking into that, the 100 kilo person will not think about sitting there. It will be very simple example, because just by looking at the chair we can say, bhai aap baithoge to matlab toot jayega karke. You can say simply, right? So that will be visible. I'm just telling you how designing is done. So you will be finding out ways so that you will allow, or let's take it as 60 kilo. A 60 kilo person only will be sitting on this thing here. So failure stress is 100 kilograms, 100 into G, force here. So allowable stress is 60 into G, 69.81. So factor of safety comes out to be 100 by 60. This comes out to be 10 by 6, 5 by 3. And this is more than 1. 5 by 3 value will be more than 1. Understand? Getting factor of safety more than 1 means, sorry, getting factor of safety less than 1 means, you know the chair will break at 100 kilos weight there, or 100 kilo person is sitting there, but you are allowing a 150 kilo person to sit on the chair, or 120 kilo person to sit on the chair. The moment he is sitting, the chair will break, the failure will happen. The main objective itself is to keep the material safer, failure not to happen. So if you are taking wrong steps like this, and if you are ending up getting failure to happen, means you are not reaching your objective.